My name is Nell, and at 34 years old, I never expected my 5-year marriage to end with a hot dog in my hand. At my husband James' family BBQ, his sister Amanda raised her glass and announced, "If Nell disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone erupted in laughter, glasses clinking in agreement, everyone except me. I just raised my hot dog, locked eyes with her, and said, "Challenge accepted." That night, I packed my bags and vanished. If you have ever felt invisible in your own life, drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to see how I turn the tables on a family that never valued me. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everybody knew your business before you did. My parents ran the local hardware store, and I learned early on about the value of hard work and independence. After college, I moved to Chicago and built a career as a graphic designer. My portfolio grew steadily, and I found myself traveling to industry conferences, showcasing my work to potential clients. That is where I met James, Boston, 2018, at the National Design Expo. He was tall, confident, and represented a prestigious marketing firm. Our conversation started professionally but quickly veered into personal territory. By the end of the weekend, we had exchanged numbers. And within a month, we were dating long distance. James came from money, old money. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. Our backgrounds could not have been more different. But when we were together, none of that seemed to matter. His visits to Chicago became more frequent, and after 6 months, he proposed. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags and how quickly everything moved, but love makes you blind to warning signs. We married in a ceremony that was much grander than I would have chosen. His mother, Catherine, insisted on handling most of the planning, and I found myself nodding along to decisions about flowers and table settings that meant nothing to me. The wedding felt more like a networking event for the Caldwell family than a celebration of our love. The first time I visited the family estate in Connecticut, Catherine welcomed me with a tight smile and a tour of their sprawling property. "We are so pleased James found someone. Creative," she said, her voice trailing off as if she could not quite find the right complimentary word. James' father, Robert, barely looked up from his newspaper, offering only a distracted handshake. His siblings, Amanda and Bradley, were polite but distant. During that first dinner, they referenced inside jokes and family vacations, never bothering to provide context or include me in the conversation. James laughed along, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I told myself it was just first meeting nerves, that they would warm up once they got to know me. For the first year, I put extraordinary effort into being accepted. I remembered every birthday and anniversary, sending thoughtful gifts. I learned their favorite dishes and spent hours perfecting recipes for family gatherings. I offered to help Catherine with her charity galas, designing free promotional materials. I listened to Robert's lengthy monologues about his golf game with genuine interest. Nothing worked. During family vacations, they would reminisce about their traditions, but never bothered creating new ones that included me. When I spoke during dinner conversations, someone would inevitably interrupt or change the subject. The message became increasingly clear. I was an outsider, tolerated only because James had chosen me. James remained blind to it all. When I gently mentioned feeling excluded, he would say, "That is just how they are with everyone," or, "You need to make more of an effort to fit in." After a while, I stopped bringing it up, not wanting to seem needy or confrontational. The subtle exclusion took its toll. I began second-guessing myself in social situations, wondering if I had said or done something wrong. My normally outgoing personality became subdued around the Caldwells. I stopped sharing my opinions or ideas, knowing they would be dismissed. I began to dress differently around them, abandoning my colorful, creative style for more conservative outfits that would blend in. 3 years into our marriage, James got promoted to the executive team at his firm, a position that required more networking and family connections. The Caldwells' influence in his career became more pronounced, and with it, their presence in our lives. We moved from our cozy Chicago apartment to a brownstone in Boston, just 20 minutes from his parents' home. What had once been monthly visits became weekly dinners, Sunday brunches, holiday weekends. Each encounter chipped away at my sense of self-worth. My design work took a back seat as I was expected to attend charity events and social functions with James. When I did manage to land a major client or receive recognition for a project, James would offer a distracted, "That is nice, honey," while his family showed zero interest. Meanwhile, Bradley's new business venture and Amanda's interior decorating hobby were treated as revolutionary achievements worthy of champagne toasts. I started to feel like a ghost in my own life, transparent and unnoticed. James and I grew distant, our conversations limited to scheduling and social obligations. In bed at night, I would look at him scrolling through emails and wonder when we had stopped seeing each other. I wondered if he had ever really seen me at all. By our 5th anniversary, the vibrant, confident woman who had once fearlessly moved to Chicago to pursue her dreams had faded into someone I barely recognized. I had become small, quiet, accommodating. The worst part was that nobody, not even James, seemed to notice the change. Or perhaps the truth was even worse, they preferred this version of me, the one that took up less space. As our anniversary approached, James' family decided to host their annual summer BBQ on the same weekend, effectively hijacking any plans we might have made to celebrate our marriage. James did not even consider that this might upset me. "It will be fun," he said. "Everyone will be there." That is when I realized that everyone had never included me. The morning of the BBQ, I woke up early, determined to make one last effort. I spent 3 hours baking an elaborate blackberry cobbler from scratch, using fresh berries from the farmer's market and a recipe passed down from my grandmother. If nothing else, I thought they might finally acknowledge my contribution to their precious family gathering. James barely noticed my efforts, scrolling through his phone while I navigated the kitchen. Mom said to be there by noon. He reminded me, as if I might deliberately make us late. I carefully placed the still-warm cobbler in a carrier and changed into a sundress that Catherine had once complimented, a rare occurrence I had clung to, like a drowning person. The Caldwell estate looked like something from a magazine spread, with its manicured lawns and colonial architecture. Staff had set up elegant tables on the sprawling back patio, complete with crisp white linens and fresh flower centerpieces. A professional caterer was arranging platters near the custom-built outdoor kitchen, where Robert would perform his annual ritual of grilling overpriced steaks, while everyone pretended his mediocre cooking was exceptional. "There they are," Catherine called out as we approached, air kissing my cheeks before pulling James into a genuine embrace. Bradley just opened some wonderful champagne. James immediately gravitated toward his father and brother near the grill, leaving me standing awkwardly with my homemade dessert. "Oh, you brought something," Catherine said with a tight smile. "How thoughtful. You can put it with the other desserts." She gestured vaguely toward a table already laden with professionally made pastries from an expensive Boston bakery. I placed my cobbler among the picture-perfect tarts and macarons, already knowing it would remain untouched. As I turned away, I overheard one of Catherine's friends ask, "And who is that again?" "James' wife," Catherine replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "She does something with computers, I think." "Graphic design," I whispered to no one. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance where everyone knew the steps except me. James was absorbed into conversations about business connections and investment opportunities. Bradley showed off his new sports car to admiring guests. Amanda held court near the bar, her laugh carrying across the lawn as she entertained friends who all seemed to share the same blonde highlights and tennis memberships. I tried joining various conversation circles, only to have them subtly shift and close whenever I approached. When I managed to insert a comment into a discussion about a new restaurant in Boston, Amanda spoke over me to share her own experience with the chef. When I offered to help the catering staff with a tray, Catherine quickly intervened, saying, "We pay them very well, dear. No need for that." By late afternoon, I found myself alone at a table, nursing a glass of white wine that had grown warm in the summer heat. James had not sought me out once since we arrived. I watched him across the lawn, animated and engaged with his family and their social circle, a version of him I rarely saw at home anymore. Amanda approached my table, her third or fourth cocktail in hand. "You look positively miserable," she said, dropping into the chair beside me. "These events are supposed to be fun, you know." "I am just tired," I replied, not wanting to give her ammunition. "Tired of trying so hard?" she asked with a smirk. "We all see it, you know, the desperate attempts to fit in." I said nothing, which seemed to annoy her more than any response could have. Amanda had always been the most openly hostile of the family, perhaps because, as the youngest, she was used to being the center of attention until I arrived. "James was always too nice," she continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Mother warned him about rushing into things with someone so different from us." More guests had begun to gather near our table, including James, who approached with a plate of food, the perfect audience for whatever Amanda was building toward. She stood up dramatically, raising her glass. "A toast to my darling brother and his wife on their anniversary weekend." A hush fell over the nearby conversations. James looked surprised but pleased by the apparent goodwill gesture from his sister. Catherine and Robert drifted closer. "To James," Amanda continued, "always the most generous Caldwell. And to Nell," she turned to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "who has tried so very hard to become one of us." I felt a chill despite the warm day. "You know," Amanda said conversationally, addressing the growing audience rather than me, "I was just telling James last week. If Nell disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The silence held for one beat before laughter erupted around me. James chuckled uncertainly, looking between his sister and me, clearly confused but unwilling to challenge the family consensus. Catherine tittered behind her hand while Robert guffawed openly. Bradley raised his beer in salute to his sister's wit. Various friends and relatives joined in, some glancing at me with pity, others not bothering to look my way at all. In that moment, something crystallized inside me. Years of small cuts had finally caused a fatal wound. I looked at these people laughing at the idea of my erasure and realized with perfect clarity, I was already a ghost to them. I had been disappearing gradually for years while desperately trying to be seen. With a calm I did not know I possessed, I raised the hot dog I had barely touched and lifted it in a mock toast. I locked eyes with Amanda and said clearly, "Challenge accepted." The laughter faltered slightly, but no one took my response seriously. Why would they? I had never stood up for myself before. James patted my shoulder absently before being pulled into another conversation about golf memberships. Amanda smirked, considering the exchange of victory in her ongoing campaign to remind me of my outsider status. They had no idea what had just happened, what line had finally been crossed. But as I sat there, a strange sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. For the remainder of the BBQ, I moved through the motions like an actress in a play. I smiled at appropriate times, nodded during conversations, and even complimented Catherine on her new landscaping. No one noticed anything different about me, which only confirmed I was making the right decision. When it was time to leave, I hugged Catherine goodbye, knowing it would be for the last time. She seemed surprised by the gesture but quickly recovered, patting my back awkwardly. "Do remind James about the charity gala next weekend," she said, already turning toward another guest. The car ride home was silent. James was slightly drunk and focused on the road. When he finally spoke, it was to ask, "Did you have a good time?" "It was illuminating," I replied truthfully. "Amanda can be a bit much," he said, the closest he had ever come to acknowledging his family's treatment of me. "But she does not mean anything by it." "Doesn't she?" I asked quietly. James sighed, clearly annoyed at the prospect of a disagreement. "Let us not do this tonight, Nell. I have an early meeting tomorrow." That was it. No concern for how I might have felt being publicly mocked. No recognition of the pain his family consistently caused me. No acknowledgement that today was supposed to have been about our anniversary. At home, James immediately headed upstairs to shower. I stood in our kitchen looking around at the space we had shared. The furniture he had selected, the bland artwork his mother had recommended. There was so little of me in this house. James was asleep by 10, slightly snoring from the combination of sun, beer, and emotional obliviousness that seemed to be his natural state. I watched him for a moment, searching for the man I had fallen in love with 5 years ago. He was unrecognizable to me now, or perhaps I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. I moved quietly through the house, gathering only what mattered. My portfolio of design work, the quilt my grandmother had made, my personal documents, the emergency cash I had been quietly saving in my studio drawer. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand next to a note that simply read, "Amanda was right. No one will notice I am gone, least of all you." My practical preparations had actually begun months ago, though I had not consciously recognized it at the time. I had maintained a separate bank account for my freelance work. I had kept in touch with my old college roommate Sarah, who had moved to Portland. I had renewed my passport. Small actions that, in retrospect, showed that some part of me had been planning an escape route all along. I called a taxi rather than taking my car, which was registered in both our names. As the driver loaded my 2 suitcases into the trunk, I looked back at the house one last time. I felt many things in that moment: fear, grief, uncertainty, but regret was not among them. The taxi took me to a hotel near the airport. I paid cash and used my maiden name. In the anonymous quiet of the room, I turned off my phone and removed the battery, knowing James would eventually try to call when he woke up and found me gone. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake thinking about the magnitude of what I was doing, leaving a 5-year marriage without warning, disappearing from my life, starting over completely at 34. The thought was terrifying, but for the first time in years, I also felt awake, alert, alive. The next morning, I purchased a burner phone and called Sarah. We had not spoken in nearly a year, but she answered with the same warmth she had always shown me. "Nell? Oh my God, it's been forever." "I left James," I said without preamble. "I need a place to stay while I figure things out." There was a brief pause before Sarah replied, "My couch is yours for as long as you need it. When are you coming?" I booked a flight to Portland for that afternoon. Before boarding, I sent a brief email to my 2 regular freelance clients, explaining that I was dealing with a family emergency and would be unavailable for several weeks, but that I valued their business and would be in touch as soon as possible. I also sent a text to James from the burner phone. "Do not try to find me. I need space to think." It was the only concession I made to the years we had spent together, a small courtesy to prevent him from filing a missing persons report. As the plane took off, I looked down at Boston growing smaller beneath me. I realized I was leaving behind not just James and his family, but the diminished version of myself I had become while trying to please them. Somewhere over Ohio, I deleted all my social media accounts. Sarah met me at the Portland airport with a hug and no questions. Her apartment was small but welcoming, filled with plants and art and books, things that reflected a life being fully lived. The contrast with the sterile perfection of the home I had shared with James was stark. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, showing me the couch that would be my bed. "Whatever happened, I'm just glad you're here." That night, I told her everything: the slow erosion of my identity, the constant subtle reminders that I was an outsider, the final humiliation at the BBQ. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged on my behalf. "Those absolute monsters," she said when I finished. "Nell, I had no idea. You should have called me sooner." "I didn't realize how bad it had gotten," I admitted. "It's like that story about boiling a frog slowly. I just kept adjusting to each new normal until suddenly I couldn't recognize myself anymore." My phone remained off, but Sarah checked her social media and reported that James had not yet publicly acknowledged my absence. His Instagram showed a business lunch the day after I left. His family's accounts continued posting about charity events and vacations. It was exactly as I had predicted. No one had noticed I was gone. After a week on Sarah's couch, I found a small studio apartment I could afford with my savings. I changed my email address and created a new phone number. I updated my portfolio website with my maiden name. I colored my hair from blonde to a rich auburn, small changes that helped me feel like I was crafting a new identity. The calls and texts to my old number eventually slowed from a flood to a trickle. Sarah, who still occasionally checked in on social media, reported that James had finally posted a vague reference to going through a difficult time 3 weeks after I left. His mother commented, "She will come to her senses, dear," Amanda wrote. "Drama queen move. Shall be back." They still didn't get it. They thought this was a tantrum, a bid for attention. They had no idea that with each passing day, I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece, into someone they would not recognize, even if they passed me on the street. Portland was nothing like Boston. The pace was different, the people more relaxed, the priorities less centered around status and appearances. For the first time since moving east with James, I could breathe freely. No one here knew me as James' wife or the outsider Caldwell. I was just Nell, graphic designer and new Portland resident. I found a job at a small creative agency that valued my portfolio more than my connections. My colleagues were eclectic and passionate about their work. When I shared ideas in meetings, people actually listened. The first time my boss publicly praised one of my concepts, I nearly cried from the simple acknowledgement. My studio apartment became a canvas for self-rediscovery. I painted one wall a vibrant teal, something Catherine would have found garish and impractical for resale. I hung art that spoke to me rather than matched the furniture. I bought plants and vintage finds from local markets. Every choice, no matter how small, was an affirmation. This is who I am. This is what I like. Those first few months were not without challenges. I jumped at unexpected knocks on my door. I scanned every crowd for familiar faces. I rehearsed excuses for my sudden relocation in case I ran into someone who knew James or his family. I kept my LinkedIn profile deactivated and avoided industry events that might connect back to my old life. Financially, I had to be careful. I had left behind joint accounts and credit cards, not wanting to leave a trail or take what I considered their money. Starting over meant budgeting carefully, taking on extra freelance work, and learning to distinguish between needs and wants. The designer clothes and luxury items that had been expected in my life with James were replaced by thrift store finds and sales racks. Surprisingly, I did not miss them. 3 months after leaving Boston, I finally worked up the courage to see a therapist. Dr. Rivera listened to my story without judgment and helped me recognize the patterns of emotional abuse I had endured. "What you experienced was a form of erasure," she explained during one session. "They systematically undermined your sense of self until you became a ghost in your own life." "But I let it happen," I said, still struggling with guilt. I kept trying to please them instead of standing up for myself. "That is a normal response to that type of environment," Dr. Rivera assured me. "You were trying to survive, but now you're doing something braver. You are choosing to thrive." Those words became a mantra in moments of doubt. I was choosing to thrive. When I felt the urge to check James' social media or wondered if his family ever spoke of me, I would redirect my energy into something constructive. I joined a community garden. I took a ceramics class. I went hiking with new friends who knew nothing of my past. 6 months into my new life, I realized I had gone an entire week without thinking about the Caldwells. I celebrated by getting the tattoo I had always wanted, but knew James would disapprove of a small compass rose on my wrist, a reminder to always navigate by my own true north. My work at the agency led to a promotion. I was now leading my own small team of designers, my ideas shaping campaigns for local businesses and startups. My portfolio was growing with projects I was genuinely proud of, not just prestigious clients I had landed through family connections. There was one moment of weakness, a rainy Sunday in November when loneliness crept in despite my best efforts. I found myself holding my phone, thumb hovering over James' name in my contacts, which I had never fully deleted. What if I had overreacted? What if he had changed? What if the familiar, even with its problems, was better than this ongoing reinvention? Then I remembered Amanda's words at the BBQ. The casual cruelty of suggesting I could disappear without notice. I remembered the laughter that followed, James included. I remembered countless dinners where I was interrupted or ignored. I remembered slowly shrinking myself to fit into a space that was never designed to accommodate me. I deleted the contact and blocked the number. The holidays were difficult that first year. I declined Sarah's invitation to join her family, not wanting to intrude and still protective of my new identity. Instead, I volunteered at a community dinner, serving meals and connecting with others who, for various reasons, were also creating their own traditions that year. An older woman named Ruth noticed me sitting alone during a break and joined me. "First holiday on your own?" she asked with remarkable perception. I nodded, surprised by the sudden lump in my throat. "I left my husband of 30 years back in the 80s, she said matter-of-factly. "Best decision I ever made. But that first Christmas nearly broke me." "Does it get easier?" I asked. "It gets different," Ruth said. "You build new memories to replace the old ones. And eventually, you realize that being true to yourself is worth more than any tradition you left behind." As we talked, I learned that Ruth had rebuilt her life in her 50s, going back to school and eventually starting her own business. "When I left Harold, everyone said I was having a midlife crisis," she told me with a chuckle. "Turned out I was having a midlife awakening." Meeting Ruth was a gift I hadn't expected. She became a mentor of sorts, meeting me for coffee every few weeks to check on my progress and share her own hard-won wisdom. Through her, I connected with other women who had similarly reinvented themselves after leaving toxic relationships. Their stories fortified me on difficult days. By spring, I had saved enough for a small down payment on a condo in a diverse neighborhood far from downtown. It was nothing like the brownstone in Boston, but it was mine, completely mine. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I felt a surge of pride that dwarfed any emotion I had experienced in my years with James. That night, I stood on my small balcony overlooking a courtyard garden, sipping champagne I had bought to celebrate with myself. For the first time since leaving, I allowed myself to wonder how James and his family were doing. Not from a place of longing, but from simple curiosity. I realized with a start that I genuinely did not care anymore. Whatever narrative they had constructed about my disappearance, whatever lies they told themselves or others, had no power over me. I was no longer the woman who had raised a hot dog in defiant toast at a family BBQ. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who would never again make herself small to accommodate others' comfort. And amazingly, no one from my old life had made any real effort to find me. Amanda had been right about one thing: they had barely noticed I was gone. Around the 8-month mark, Sarah called with news. "You might want to sit down for this," she said. "What happened?" I asked, immediately tense. "James is engaged." I had prepared myself for many possibilities after leaving, but this was not one of them. "Engaged? It's been less than a year." "To Melanie Winthrop," Sarah continued. "She's from one of those old Boston families. Her father owns half the waterfront or something." The name was vaguely familiar. I remembered Catherine mentioning the Winthrops at some function, speaking with the reverence she reserved for people she considered social equals. "How do you know this?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "It's all over Instagram." Catherine posted about welcoming her to the family. "Big announcement dinner at their country club." "The works?" I asked Sarah to send me screenshots, a request I had never made before. When they arrived, I studied them with detached curiosity, like an anthropologist examining an unfamiliar culture. There was James, arm around a willowy brunette who wore the exact pearls Catherine had once suggested I should invest in. The Caldwell family clustered around them, beaming with approval. Robert, Catherine, Bradley, and Amanda flanking the happy couple like proud architects of the arrangement. The caption read, "Overjoyed to welcome Melanie to our family. Some matches are simply meant to be." The comments were equally revealing. Old family friends expressing delight at the perfect pairing. Business associates congratulating the merger of two distinguished families. Amanda writing, "Finally, a sister I can borrow clothes from." A jab that was not lost on me. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement that James had been married before. I had been erased so completely that his new engagement could be celebrated publicly without a hint of the recent past. Sarah waited for my reaction. "Are you okay?" To my surprise, I laughed. They did exactly what I expected. They found someone who fits their mold and pretended I never existed. My therapist suggested that I might feel a complex mix of emotions about the news, and she was right. There was a fleeting sting of rejection, quickly replaced by relief. James had moved on, which meant any lingering guilt I felt about leaving could finally be put to rest. He clearly had not been devastated by my absence. What I found most interesting was learning how the family had managed my disappearance socially. Through careful questioning of mutual connections, Sarah discovered that the official story was that I had returned to the Midwest for family reasons, and that the separation had been mutual and amicable. No drama, no scandal, nothing to tarnish the Caldwell reputation. Amanda had apparently told friends that we all saw it coming and she never really fit in, rewriting history to make my departure seem inevitable and unremarkable. Catherine had focused on comforting her son through his challenging time, while simultaneously introducing him to eligible young women from appropriate families. The speed with which they had replaced me confirmed everything I had felt during those 5 years. I had been an accessory, not a person. A temporary mistake that could be corrected with the right substitute. This realization, rather than hurting me, liberated me further. I had spent years trying to earn the approval of people who had never seen me as an individual worthy of respect. Their ability to move on so quickly and completely was the final evidence I needed that leaving had been the right choice. Through these secondhand reports, I also learned that James had barely looked for me. He had filed a missing persons report after 3 days. But when police confirmed I had left voluntarily and was not in danger, he had quickly accepted the situation. There were no desperate social media pleas, no private investigators, no genuine effort to understand why I had left or where I had gone. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. Amanda's cruel joke had proven prophetic, though not in the way she had intended. They had not noticed I was gone because they had never truly seen me in the first place. Around the 9-month mark, I discovered through industry channels that James had been promoted to partner at his firm. The announcement mentioned his upcoming marriage to Melanie, noting that her family connections would strengthen the firm's position in certain markets. Even his professional achievements were framed as family transactions. I found myself wondering about Melanie. Did she know what she was walking into? Would she maintain her identity, or would she gradually be reshaped into another accessory for the Caldwell collection? I briefly considered warning her, perhaps an anonymous note, but quickly dismissed the idea. Her journey was not mine to manage, and reconnecting with that world in any way would only undermine the new life I had built. As my 1-year anniversary of leaving approached, I reflected on how thoroughly I had been removed from the Caldwell narrative. Not a single mutual acquaintance had mentioned seeing my picture in their home. No one reported James speaking of me in any context. The few possessions I had left behind had presumably been discarded or stored away. Even more telling was how rarely I thought of them now. Weeks would pass without James crossing my mind. The visceral reaction I once had to the memory of Amanda had faded to mild distaste. Catherine and Robert's opinions, once so crushing, now seemed laughably irrelevant to my life. I had made new friends who knew me only as I was now confident, creative, independent. I had colleagues who respected my ideas and valued my contributions. I had built a small but meaningful community of people who saw me clearly. The final confirmation of my complete erasure from the Caldwell world came when Sarah, still my occasional intelligence gatherer, sent me an invitation she had found posted on social media. James and Melanie would be married in June, almost exactly a year after I had walked away. The event would be held at the Caldwell estate, the same place where Amanda had made her fateful joke at the family BBQ. The invitation featured a professional engagement photo. The couple posed against the backdrop of Boston Harbor. They looked like a catalog advertisement for privileged contentment. The accompanying announcement mentioned James' background and accomplishments, Melanie's prestigious education and family connections. There was no reference to his previous marriage. I had become a ghost, just as I had felt for all those years at their dinner table. The difference was that now, that status brought me peace instead of pain. As the anniversary of my departure approached, Portland was in full spring bloom. My condo balcony overflowed with the herbs and flowers I had planted. My design team had just won a regional award for a campaign promoting local sustainable businesses. I had been dating Michael, a kind and thoughtful architect, for 2 months cautiously, but with growing trust. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror barely resembled the one who had left Boston a year earlier. My hair, now its natural brown with subtle highlights, fell in loose waves past my shoulders. My wardrobe reflected my personal taste, vibrant colors, comfortable fabrics, unique accessories from local artisans. Most significantly, my eyes had lost the wary, apologetic look they had carried for so long. "I think we should celebrate," Ruth said during our weekly coffee. "1 year of freedom deserves recognition." I had not told many people about the significance of the date, but Ruth had become someone I could be completely honest with. "It feels strange to commemorate running away," I said. Ruth fixed me with her no-nonsense stare. "You didn't run away, Nell. You ran toward yourself. There's a difference." She was right, as she often was. I had not simply fled a bad situation. I had consciously chosen a different path, one that honored who I truly was. That was worth celebrating. I decided to mark the occasion with a small dinner party at my condo, inviting the handful of people who had become important in my new life. Sarah flew in from Seattle, where she had relocated for work. Ruth brought her famous apple pie. My colleagues from the agency came bearing wine and genuine affection. Michael arrived early to help me prepare, moving around my kitchen with an ease that spoke to how comfortable we had become with each other. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally, touching on projects and plans, shared jokes, and future dreams. Looking around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who valued me for exactly who I was, I felt a profound sense of belonging that had eluded me throughout my years with the Caldwells. Later, after everyone had gone and Michael had kissed me goodnight, I opened my laptop with a sense of resolution. For 12 months, I had refrained from looking up anything about my former life, focusing entirely on building my new one. But on this anniversary, I decided to allow myself one final check, a way of closing the chapter completely. I created a temporary social media account, anonymous and untraceable. I searched for James, finding his profile immediately. As expected, it was filled with wedding preparations and professional achievements, all carefully curated to project success and status. The wedding was a week away. Catherine had posted extensive details about the venue decorations, menu selections, and notable guests. Amanda shared pictures of herself at the bridal shower, standing beside Melanie with a proprietary arm around her shoulders. Bradley announced his role as best man with a throwback photo of himself and James as children. It was as if my 5 years with James had never happened. There was no trace of me in any of their narratives, no acknowledgement of the space I had once occupied. I had been completely replaced, the role of James' wife seamlessly recast with a more suitable actress. I expected to feel anger or hurt at this erasure. Instead, I found myself smiling at the predictability of it all. I had finally seen through the illusion of the perfect Caldwell family. Their apparent unity and strength were maintained only by rigid conformity and the strategic removal of anything or anyone that contradicted their preferred story. As I scrolled through the carefully staged photos, I realized they were trapped in roles just as I had been, but without the awareness or courage to break free. James would marry a woman approved by his parents. He would advance in his career through family connections. He would raise children to continue the same pattern. His life was as predetermined now as it had been when I left. I, on the other hand, was writing my own story. I closed the laptop and walked to the balcony, breathing in the night air. Somewhere across the country, final preparations were being made for a wedding at the Caldwell estate. The same estate where, a year ago, a thoughtless joke had changed the course of my life. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. Amanda could never have imagined that her cruel words would become the key to my freedom. She had meant to highlight my insignificance, but instead had illuminated the fundamental truth of my situation. I had needed to disappear to find myself again. The next morning, I called Dr. Rivera for an unscheduled session. I checked their social media, I admitted. After all this time, she nodded without judgment. "What did you learn?" "That I made the right choice," I said confidently. "They erased me completely. It's like I never existed." "Does that hurt?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. No, it confirms what I already knew. I was never real to them. but am real to myself now, and to the people in my life who actually see me." Dr. Rivera smiled. "That's tremendous progress, Nell. But I sense there's something else on your mind." She was right. Something had been forming in my thoughts since seeing those wedding preparations, a gesture that felt important for my own closure. "I think I want to send them something," I said. "Not to hurt them or get revenge, but to reclaim my narrative. To make sure they know I didn't just disappear, I chose to leave. And I thrived because of it." We discussed what healthy closure might look like, the difference between vindication and vengeance, the importance of making this final communication serve my healing rather than their discomfort. By the end of the session, I had clarity. I would send one message, not to cause pain but to complete my journey. It would be delivered on the day that marked exactly 1 year since the BBQ, the day Amanda had unknowingly set me free. I spent the next few days carefully curating a small photo album. Pictures of my award-winning design work, my new condo with its colorful walls and personal touches. Friends gathered around my dinner table. A selfie from the summit of Mount Hood, which I had hiked with my new hiking group. Small snapshots of a life fully lived. I wrote a brief note to accompany the photos. A year ago, Amanda suggested no one would notice if I disappeared. She was right, but in disappearing from your world, I finally became visible in my own. I'm not sending this out of anger, but gratitude. That day gave me the courage to find where I truly belong. I'm happy. I'm thriving. I'm seen. I sent the package to arrive on the exact anniversary of the BBQ, addressing it simply to the Caldwell family. I included no return address, no identifying information beyond the photos and note. It was not an invitation to reconnect, just a period at the end of a completed sentence. After dropping the package at the post office, I felt a profound sense of peace. Whether they received it, ignored it, or discussed it behind closed doors, did not matter. I had taken back the narrative of my disappearance. I had transformed from someone who was erased to someone who chose to walk away. That night, Michael and I had dinner at a small local restaurant where the chef knew us by name. As we walked home along the waterfront, he took my hand and asked about my day. I told him about sending the package, explaining the significance of the date. "Do you think they'll understand what you're trying to say?" he asked. I shook my head. "Probably not. But I didn't send it for them. I sent it for me." Michael nodded, understanding in a way James never could have. "To closing old doors," he said, squeezing my hand. "And opening new ones," I replied. The day after I sent the package, I deleted the temporary social media account I had created. Whatever reaction the Caldwells might have to my message, I did not need or want to witness it. That chapter of my life was officially closed. The relief was immediate and profound. For a full year, I had been rebuilding myself piece by piece, but there had always been an invisible tether connecting me to my past. The simple act of sending that package, of acknowledging what had happened and how I had transformed because of it, severed that final connection. In my next session with Dr. Rivera, we discussed what true closure meant. "Many people think closure comes from the other person," she observed. "They wait for an apology, an explanation, some sign that the person who hurt them understands what they did. But real closure comes from within. It's about making peace with your own story." "I think I've finally done that," I said. "For so long, I was defined by their perception of me, or lack thereof. Now I'm defined by my own choices and the relationships I've built with people who actually value me." "That," Dr. Rivera said with a warm smile, "is what healing looks like." Summer in Portland brought outdoor concerts, farmers markets, and weekends spent exploring the Columbia River Gorge. Michael and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something I had never experienced with James. A partnership of equals, built on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's thoughts and feelings. My design work continued to flourish. The agency offered me a position as creative director, recognizing my contributions to their recent growth. I accepted with confidence, no longer doubting whether I deserved a seat at the table. Ruth celebrated her 70th birthday, and I helped organize a surprise party that brought together the many people she had mentored and supported over the years. Watching her surrounded by love and appreciation, I saw a possible future for myself, one where my value was measured by the authentic connections I had fostered, not the social status I had achieved. One evening in late August, Michael and I were having dinner at my condo when he asked, "Do you ever regret how things ended with your ex?" I considered the question honestly. "I regret not leaving sooner," I finally said. "I regret the years I spent trying to be someone I'm not." But the way I left? No. It was the first truly honest thing I'd done in that relationship. "I'm glad you found your way here," he said, reaching across the table for my hand. "So am I," I replied, and I meant it with my whole heart. As fall approached, I received an invitation to speak at a design conference in Chicago. It would be my first time returning to the Midwest since leaving Boston. A symbolic journey back to my roots. I accepted without hesitation. The conference was energizing, filled with creative people passionate about their work. After my presentation on authentic branding for community-based businesses, several attendees approached with questions and compliments. As I spoke with them, I realized how much my voice had changed, not just in content, but in confidence. I no longer prefaced my opinions with apologies or looked for validation after expressing an idea. On the final day of the conference, I took a detour to visit my hometown in Ohio. The hardware store my parents had run was now a coffee shop, but many of the familiar landmarks remained. Walking those streets, I reconnected with the parts of myself that had existed before James and the Caldwells, parts I had nearly lost during those years of trying to fit into their world. I visited my parents' graves, bringing fresh flowers and updating them on my new life. Though they had been gone for many years, I found comfort in imagining their pride in how I had reclaimed myself. My father had always said, "Never let anyone dim your light, Nellie," advice I had forgotten until it was almost too late. Back in Portland, as the 1 year and 3-month mark of my departure passed, I found myself thinking about Melanie. The wedding would have happened months ago. She would now be living the life that had once been mine, navigating the complex dynamics of the Caldwell family. I hoped she was stronger than I had been, or at least more naturally suited to their world. Michael and I spent Thanksgiving with Ruth and her extended family, a boisterous gathering that bore no resemblance to the formal, tense holidays at the Caldwell estate. Watching Michael charm Ruth's grandchildren with magic tricks, I felt a happiness so different from anything I had known with James that it seemed like an entirely different emotion. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had transformed in 18 months. I had left behind a marriage, a city, and a version of myself that had been slowly suffocating. In their place, I had built a career based on genuine talent, relationships founded on mutual respect, and a self-identity rooted in authenticity. The Caldwells had believed I would fade away without them, becoming truly invisible once removed from their sphere of influence. Amanda had voiced this belief with casual cruelty, never imagining that her words would catalyze my liberation. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." She had been wrong. By disappearing from their world, I had finally become visible in my own. People noticed me now, friends, colleagues, clients, Michael, because I was fully present, undiminished, real. The final irony was that in the end, they were the ones who had faded from my life. Once so dominant in my thoughts and emotions, the Caldwells had become distant figures. Characters in a story I occasionally remembered but no longer felt connected to. They had forgotten me immediately. But I had done the more difficult, more meaningful work of forgetting them gradually, intentionally, completely. The challenge Amanda unknowingly set before me that day had been more than accepted. It had been transformed into something powerful and life-affirming. I had not just disappeared. I had emerged. As we enter a new year, I invite you to consider what parts of your life might be dimming your light. Are there relationships, jobs, or habits that make you feel smaller, less seen, less valued? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what no longer serves us, even when others tell us we won't survive the departure. Trust me, you will not only survive, you will thrive. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment telling me about a time you chose yourself over others' expectations. Hit that like button if you've ever had to start over, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, being forgotten by those who never truly saw you is not a loss, it's a liberation. Thank you for listening to my journey.